All right. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for spending with me your afternoon or evening, wherever you're located. I'm in California, so it's late afternoon my time. But I want to welcome you to the Law School Admissions Secret to Success Part 1. I don't want to freak you out, but it's 4 parts. I initially had done it as a 1 webinar, and it was wild because I was losing my voice, trying to go as fast as I possibly could to cover as much information as possible. Then I thought maybe 2 parts, even then it wasn't covering it. There is so much to cover for law school admissions, and it's an area that I personally really love. So I spread it out over 4 parts. Part 1 is going to cover the admissions landscape. Part 2 is going to cover the components of the application itself, financial aid, choosing the right school, and so forth. Part 3 is going to cover really about story crafting and storytelling and how you can write the best personal statement and diversity statement and so forth. And then finally, part 4 is the submissions process, the decision process, the success process when you go to law school and thereafter. So dividing it up into 4 webinars, I'm trying to keep it so that I can spend about 30 to 40 minutes talking. And then I want to open it up to you guys to ask me anything related to what we've covered today. And then if there's something that I think we're going to cover next time, I'll tease you with it. And then you're going to have to jump on to the next webinar as it comes on. Okay. So without further ado, let me quickly get started. Here's a bit of a background about who I am. I am the founder and CEO of Right Track Admissions. I went to UCLA for my undergrad, then I went to Berkeley for law school. Really struggled to try to get into a top law school because my LSAT was so low. It was about a 154 after having taken it 3 times. And so I really had to bank on essentially succeeding in my application, mitigating the weakness in my LSAT by having an outstanding application. And that's really where I got started with the concept of creating Right Track Admissions and helping people with their applications. Those with low LSAT scores, poor GPAs, with not enough experience, may consider themselves not having a super unique profile. And so that's where I started Right Track Admissions. Thereafter, during law school, I really maximized my time. I was on law review. I started a law journal, did all kinds of stuff. And then in the middle of law school, I took a year out, went and did a master's in England, in Cambridge, in international relations with an emphasis on international law. And then I went about 7-8 years later back to graduate school to do a master's at the Kennedy School, as you can see the picture there, where I did my master's of public administration and got a full scholarship, largely using the secrets to success for admissions that I am applying to you today. I used it for my own trajectory. So I'm a great example of the proof in the pudding of how to really get into law school and then really kind of ace the process and get financial aid out of it. Personally, in terms of law, I did corporate law for a little bit. Then I did international development law, representing the US government internationally. And then I've also done entrepreneurship, as you can see, as the founder of Right Track Admissions. All right. So that's a little bit of my background. I started the company in 2008, about 16 years ago. So I've been doing it ever since. It's something I love to do. I love helping students and creating webinars just like this, that you guys are well informed of how to get into law school, kind of like the back door to really give you the best secrets and hacks to success. All right. So let me give you a little bit of an overview of the law school landscape, okay? There are currently about 198 ABA accredited law schools in the US, and we're going to primarily focus on the US because that's obviously the hardest process of admissions, in my opinion, anywhere in the world, because we have to go through 4 years of undergrad before we can apply to law school, while a lot of other countries like England and so forth, you can do a law degree straight as an undergraduate. So we have about 198 ABA accredited, that's American Bar Association accredited schools, which allows you to take the bar and become a practicing lawyer. If you're not ABA accredited, I believe you have to take on certain extra credentials to then be able to apply for the bar in your respective state. There's about 30,000 people applying to law school. To be honest, it's a little less than in previous years. but it looks like now it's increasing again for 2025. So there definitely are quite a high number, as you can see, 30,000 applicants applying to those schools. And if you're aiming for a top school, well, do the math. If on average every law school has about 400 seats available, that means in the top 10, that's about 4,000 spots right there to get into a top 10. 30,000 applicants. Oftentimes there's about 20,000 applicants applying across the board to the top 10, top 15 schools. So it gets really, really competitive, as you may know, and I'm going to show you right now how competitive it can get. Average cost of tuition, about $50,000. Now, when I was in law school, hopefully that doesn't make me sound too old, the law school tuition at UC Berkeley started off at $16,000, ended about $24,000 by the time I graduated. Now it's about $48,000. So definitely the cost of tuition has gone up, up, and up. And so you want to put yourself in the best situation possible by essentially having the best application so that you can get financial aid and you can get into the top school that you want to get into and mitigate, again, if you have a poor GPA or poor LSAT and so forth. All right, so that's a little bit of the lay of the land. I'm going to jump quickly ahead and then I'm going to come back to that slide. Here, guys, you can see the amount of competition. At Yale Law School, it's about 6.2% of people are accepted with a 393 GPA at a 173. That's wild. That's really hard. My GPA was very competitive. It was about a 394. But again, my LSAT doesn't even have me ranked. It was 154. Doesn't even have me ranked in the top 20. So I clearly needed to mitigate everything I could. Sadly, my alma mater is now 15th. When I was applying, it was 6. That's depressing. But hopefully it will skyrocket back to where it deserves to be around here. Now, and props to Duke, because Duke used to be in the top 15. Now it's a number 4 school. Chicago used to be 6th. Now it's 3rd. Harvard went down to 4th. It used to be 3rd. So kind of interesting how the rankings have been changing in more recent years. But you can see how difficult the competition is. 6%, 5%, 7%, 6%, 4.5% to get into Harvard. So competition's stiff. In the highest level is about, what is that? Wake Forest. Wow. And props to Wake Forest because it definitely was in the top 20 before. Now is about, what is that? 15% chance of admission to get into that school. Now, given that, I want you to stop for a second. I want you to think about, why are you going to law school? Not just that you want to go to law school, but why are you going to law school? What are the questions you should be asking yourself as you prepare yourself for the process of applying to law school? Super important. Why? It's 3 years. That's 3 years of your life, 3 years that you could be working and making money, right? 3 years of debt. So not only are you losing money because you're not working, but you're paying for your education in the tune of, as we said, $50,000, and that doesn't really count housing. That's just tuition. So you're looking at maybe $200,000 to $300,000 of debt, right? So why take on $300,000 of debt, lose about, let's say out of undergrad, $60,000 a year in potential earnings? So that's $180,000. So you're really in the whole $500,000 that you otherwise could have had. Well, you've got to ask yourself these questions. And so first thing I want you to ask yourself is, why am I even pursuing law? And make sure that the answer is solid. It can't just be because I want to make money, because you're going to lose about $500,000 and you're going to be taking on debt that compounds over time. So you really want to know, why are you applying to law school? Personally, I didn't have much choice. And I probably didn't come at it the right way. I was a history major, poli-sci minor. I graduated in 2002 from college. The economy was in shambles. I couldn't get a job. And so I thought, yeah, maybe the best option for me is law school. I thought I was a good writer. I like to argue. I felt like advocacy was something important in my DNA. So I said, you know what, may give me the best options in terms of what I can do in the future. So that's why I went to law school. But you really want to ask yourself that question, because that question is going to come up really in your personal statement and potentially in your interview, okay? Then if you say, okay, maybe law school is not right for me, well, what other graduate program or professional option do I have? So you have to weigh it up. If you're not going to go to law school, what other options do you have? For me personally, I didn't have many options. So I thought, and I liked studying, so I said, why not continue my studies? But if there's another process like social work and social policy, right? Or let's say you really were keen on mergers and acquisitions and you want to look at the legal side, maybe there's a financial component to it, right? So you want to think about that as well. Is like maybe there's an alternative to law school that's shorter and that's not as expensive. Okay, well, what is my legal path based on my interest, skills, and the market? The market, very, very important. You want to make sure that you're aligning with what the market is requesting. You don't want to do an area of law that's becoming obsolete, right? So what are your interests? For me, my interests, I'm going to say, I'm sure everybody and their mother was thinking about it, international law. I didn't know what the hell it was. Later on, it kind of manifested. I wrote about it and I ended up doing it, working with the US government. But at least at the time, I didn't know what international law was. And so in my mind, it was more about constitutional law, comparative law, and that was my focus. And that's what I really wanted to do in law school. And who I was and what I wrote about aligned with that. So it made sense and made my application stand out. Okay. Do I appreciate the rigor of law school and the state bar? Are you academically inclined? If you're not, then this is a very academically oriented program. So you want to make sure that you really are in line with what you need to succeed. And that means you have to be academically inclined, taking notes, going to class, reading a ton, being analytical, right? To be able to do that. Are you ready, as I said, for significant debt and 3 years of study and 3 years of foregoing a salary, right? How can I make sure I'm not made redundant with the advances of legal AI? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And guys, ask me questions about it. A lot of the what I'm offering today in terms of my in terms of these webinars is based off of my law school admissions mastery guide and mastery course, of which I just added a chapter on legal AI so that we can help each other not become redundant in the legal field. So, but you have to ask yourself that question. If you're going to go into a field that is very repetitive and document heavy, well, you may end up rendering yourself obsolete down the road. So you do like litigation, where you're going to be in front of court and arguing, that's not going to be readily overtaken by AI. Maybe the briefs you write, but not arguing in court. So you got to start thinking about how and what purpose you will serve in a world where AI is becoming a reality. And then finally, given that you say, you know what, I couldn't find an alternative. I know why I want to go to law school. I'm ready to take on the rigor. I'm ready to take on the debt in 3 years of school. I kind of know what direction I want to go. That's not going to make me redundant. Okay, now you know law school is right for you. Well, then what skills do you need to develop to be a standout candidate? Okay? And you want to think about that. And in law school, it's all about analytical thinking. And I'm going to get to this. So this is, don't write it down yet, because I'm going to get to it. It's going to help you out a lot. But analytical thinking, communications, the ability to be a strong advocate, strong work ethic, good integrity, and so forth. So what are the skills and how do you stand out? Now, given all these questions I asked you, here are quickly some ideas for you to think about in terms of actions to take. Again, it's August now, right? And so some of you are applying this year, okay? And right now, but some of you may be thinking about taking a year out. So you've got opportunity to take these actionable steps. Talk to your pre-law advisor if you're still in school. Fine-tune your core competencies, which we're going to talk about. Research, writing, especially if you can take classes that can really exhibit your writing. Do the background research in terms of law, market trends, in terms of what exists and what are the market trends. If you really start seeing, you know what, in the area I want to go, law is going to become redundant. I don't want to do it, and then forget about it. It may not be the right path for you, right? Gain practical legal experience. I did that, just so that you know. And this is the kind of, I'm not going to call it gap year. I'm just going to say I took time off from undergrad. I worked at a really well-known law firm out here in Los Angeles. And what it did for me, because I was just thinking about this recently, it allowed me, one, to get great letters of recommendation for the people I worked with. Two, it allowed me to have more time to study for the LSAT and to prepare my application, which is what got me into law school. Three, it allowed me to have a better idea of which area of law I want to kind of focus on: litigation, corporate, transactional, international, right? And then fourth, I saved some money by working so that when I started law school, I wasn't pulling debt immediately, right? I was able to have a little bit of savings. And we're going to talk about how I graduated from law school, not only without taking out significant loans, but not only debt-free, but also with a profit. That's bananas. Not many people are going to be able to boast that. And I'm going to tell you how I did that, but in the fourth part of this webinar. So make sure to keep tuning in. Audit a law school class. So if you go to like UCLA, right down the street from where I am, or USC or Vanderbilt or whatever it is, and they've got a law school right there, go audit a class, see if it's of interest to you, okay? And then you can write about it in your application essays. Network with law students and alum. Folks like me ask me, hey, I'm interested in law school. What do you think? What should I avoid? What should I be doing, right? Take a law school boot camp. There's not that many out there, but if you have the opportunity to do that over the summer. They offer these boot camps so that you can get a sense of what you should be expecting. And then write out your SWOT analysis of your candidacy. I talk a lot about that in the legal guide in the mastery course, and it's something that we do at Right Track for you. We have something called CAP, Law App, which is Law Admissions Assessment Program, where we do your SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your candidacy. If you don't want to do it with us, do it on your own, create your little grid and write it out. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. All right. We talked about this. Now, I want you to start thinking about preparing your profile. Now, some of you guys may be like, dude, I'm applying right now. How do I have the time? Well, I still think it's worthwhile listening in because it's going to help you fine tune and reverse engineer what you need to be thinking about when you start writing your application materials. All right. Here is what law schools look for. I initially called it the 5 C's and I added a 6th. It's also in the mastery course. I talk about this at length. I swear, if you guys were in front of me, I'd be asking you without even showing you, what do you think the schools are going to be looking for? Also, you guys should be giving me props. I came up with 6 C's to be able to really showcase exactly what law schools want so that you can remember it easier as you go through this process. Now, on a macro, schools look for IQ and EQ. IQ, obviously, they don't want somebody coming into their school that doesn't have the intellectual prowess to succeed. But they also want EQ. Because as a lawyer, you're not operating in a box. If you operate in a box, guess what? You're going to be made redundant because AI is going to eat your meal. So you need to have strong EQ. And EQ is what's going to make you impervious as possible to AI. So here are the things that I really want you to think about. In terms, and especially a lot of these are going to have EQ related, not just IQ, but EQ related significance. So first, collaborative. You need to exhibit to the school that you're a team player, that when you're in a classroom, you're going to basically help other students out, that you're going to help people in the community, that you have strong leadership skills, okay? So that really shows that you have a collaborative spirit, that you're not just someone who's going to be studying. And kind of like back in the day, somebody told me that in some law schools, they were so competitive, people were ripping out the pages of law books so that people couldn't study and they would fail their exams. Those days are bygone, but the idea is that they want other people to help. I used to always share my notes with people, and one of the most effective ways of studying for law school is in study groups. So you want to be collaborative. Capable, this is your IQ right here. Capable, you want to showcase that you have strong research skills, communication skills, critical thinking skills. But Hamada, what am I doing? I'm applying now. How the hell do I show this? Well, dig into your academics and make sure that you pop that up on your resume so that people know that you have these core skills. Make sure that you hint to them in your personal statement, in your diversity statement, in your application materials, your addenda, right? That's important. If you've got another year of school or you're working and you're thinking about applying, again, hone in on research, communications, which is writing and speaking, and then critical thinking analysis. That is very, very important in terms of showing that you can really meet the IQ required, the academic record required of a law school, because more than almost any program out there, maybe like medical school, it's very, very academically focused, not like an MBA, right? It's very academically focused. Compassionate. So they want to see that you have a strong sensitivity to help people. Obviously, that's why people focus on pro bono hours when you're working as a lawyer. So you want to basically have that, and you want to showcase that you really want to give back to other people. That's super important for law schools, that they have people that are compassionate and they care about other people's rights. I mean, in the end of the day, that's what a lot of lawyers hopefully end up doing at some point in their career, right? So that's very, very important as well. Conscientious, which is a little bit different from compassionate, is that you have a strong sense of integrity and ethics. You're ethical, right? Because even in law school, you have something called the moral. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. It's like a moral application that you have to file that basically shows that you don't have a DUI, that you don't have a criminal record, that you don't have something that really undermines your moral turpitude. And so you want to make sure that you can talk about that. And we're going to talk about this in, I believe, the second part of this webinar series, in terms of how to overcome any ethical issues that you may have. Like maybe you had a DUI. How do you talk about that in your application, in your addendum? So we're going to speak more about that. You're committed, which is very, very important, that you're not going to start law school and bail out after a semester or a year or 2 years. So you have to show you have a strong work ethic and you're driven and you're making the right decision in terms of going to law school. And then finally, curious. And that's really about continuous learning and adaptability. Super, super important, because you want to show the school that you're not just going to law school and you're myopic, but that you're getting a broad perspective of everything that you're going to learn from. When I was in law school, I took securities law, I took treaties, I took, I took obviously all the core requirements, evidence, con law. I'm trying to think, I almost did a flush after I took the bar. I was so freaking PTSD. I forgot even the courses I took in law school. But I mean, the idea is that you really want to have a broad, expansive approach to the different courses you take. And you want to show the school that you have the ability to really and are eager to consistently learn. And this is another mechanism, continuous learning, to beating AI, because you constantly are adapting, pivoting, learning, and adding to your profile. So for me personally, again, I do transactional law right now on my own as an attorney, in addition to running Right Track. But I also do strategy and operations. It turns out lawyers tend to be very good at operations. So I advise a medtech company on operations, right? And I think that's just an important facet of what lawyers can bring to the table. And they came from continuous learning. So please keep these 6 C's in mind, because this is what you want to flex in every single part of the application. But now you may be asking me, well, Hamada, how do I showcase these things in my life? Like, how do I even develop these skills? But boom, here it is. In your academics, that's where you can really showcase and flex your writing, analytical, or oral advocacy and research skills, right? That really can be developed and showcased and demonstrated academically. In terms of your life experiences, this is where you kind of start showcasing them, the ability that you have a strong sense of commitment, for example, right? And compassion, right? And that comes under challenges faced and hardships overcome. They want to see that always in your application, your personal statement, your diversity statement, in your addendum. They want to see how you've overcome difficulties in your life. Personal development, publications, public speaking, civic engagement, boom, civic engagement right here, public speaking right here, right? So this is kind of where you showcase in terms of your personal development in your life, in terms of these qualities if you have the opportunity. Extracurricular, sports, student government, debate, identity groups that you're part of. This shows a sense of collaboration, right? Teamwork, leadership, again, conscientiousness, commitment, right? Compassion, right? Some senses capability as well, right? Then you've got, and curiosity, because you're taking on certain sports and things that you may not necessarily know about, but you want to keep learning. Volunteer activities. Again, this is the compassion, community service, passion-driven projects. And then finally, professional experiences that you may want to gain. Internships, full-time, part-time work. So when I was in between law school, undergrad and law school, I worked full-time at a law firm. I worked part-time doing volunteer work, all of which helped me develop my resume so that I was an even stronger candidate. So here is how you effectuate everything. Here is how you should be spending time living your story. I keep talking about the concept of how you put together your profile, but I want you to think about this. Living your story. How important is that idea? Living your story. What you are experiencing today, even listening to me, is going to impact what you're going to write about tomorrow. That's wild. So if you gain those life experiences, If you have those volunteer activities and extracurriculars and personal development, professional development, you can create those experiences that you're going to write about in your application. That's interesting. If you are sedentary, you don't go out, you don't communicate, you don't seek experiences, you don't take risks, there's nothing you're going to be able to write about that's that effective, that unique, and that pen dropping. So you want to seek these experiences to really have a robust profile to apply to law schools. Okay? Now, once you've gone through and you've basically started living your story and going through these life experiences, I want you to start gathering the data here. So first of all, we talked about a SWOT analysis. So you have all these life experiences, all these reasons, ask yourself all these questions, start putting together your SWOT. And I like putting it together with this. Again, you guys got to give me props. I don't know how the hell I came up with 4 M's for SWOT. So with your strengths, you maximize your strengths. With weaknesses, you seek to mitigate them. I had a poor LSAT. What was I going to do? So I sat there, I thought hard, and I was like, I'm going to triple down on my application. And I spent 5 months working on my application, okay? So I mitigated that weakness with a strong application. What were the opportunities I had? I took a year out, 2 years out, and I was able to try to overcome my LSAT. So that was an opportunity I had. Another opportunity is I was able to really zone in and hone in on finding great letters of recommendation. Another opportunity I had was I had to go out there and get volunteer experiences to add to my profile. Another opportunity I had is I found a friend to help me with my law school application who ended up helping me get into law school. And then that's what inspired me to start Right Track. What were the incoming threats? A poor LSAT. Incoming threats, spending too much time and falling into the trap of the enemy of good is better, which is overthinking your personal statement, overthinking your application because you're so freaked out that you end up applying well past November. And then you pretty much screw yourself because now most law schools are rolling admission. You miss an opportunity to apply early, which puts you ahead of the major part of the competition. So that's a threat that you got to be wary of. So that's a good example of how do you do a SWOT analysis, break it up there so that you take stock of where you are, where you lie. The law school application tracker. Now this, I'm jumping a little bit ahead because we're going to talk about the law schools, but here's kind of where you list the law school. We're going to talk about how to pick the right law school next week in my next week webinar. But these are the kind of things you always want to have a tracker so that you can monitor everything. So you know why you want to go to that law school, what do they require, what are the deadlines, where do they rank, what are their concentrations, what does the community vibe look like, have you visited the campus? Take some notes about that. We're going to talk about that next week as well. How big is the school? How much does it cost? All of that goes into this spreadsheet. And the good news is, guys, if you attend all the webinars, we're going to give you this tracker so that you have it for you to track it for free. So keep and stay tuned. Then we've got these lists. Guys, you have an experience right now whereby you are having life experiences. Something wild happened, right? And you go through it, and then 5 months later, you're trying to remember what the hell happened. What a lost opportunity. So you want to make sure that you have these lists. You have a Google Doc. It's open, and if you're constantly asking yourself, what if something happens, write it down, write it down, write it down, write it down. You have a volunteer experiences, write it down. Now, obviously, the easiest way to do that is to put it into a resume. But sometimes a resume is still shortened, still a page or 2 or maybe 3. So you want to have a list where you have a running Google Doc where you put all these experiences. While I was helping John in 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, 6, and 7, you want to ask yourself, I remember vividly when I spoke with John's wife, she told me X, Y, and Z, and that was so profound for me. Write it down so that you remember it years later when you want to write about it, or months later, right? Also, you want to have a brag list, which you're going to supply to your recommender. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. I don't want to get too involved in this, but the brag list basically is a series of bullets that you append to your draft personal statement and your transcript that you provide to the recommender. And in the brag list, you write about your strengths and what you want them to mention in their letter of recommendation to you. Chances are they're probably going to take that list of bullets you put together, and probably pop it into ChatGPT and probably come up with a letter of rec for you. And hopefully it's good enough and personal enough that you should be fine. But the closer relationship you have with that recommender, we're going to talk about this, I believe, next week, the better you're going to be in terms of getting a recommendation that's not just a ChatGPT, general letter, but it's going to be really honed in and focused. And that brag list will help you with that process. So that even if they put it in ChatGPT, it will be a lot more focused to you rather than just generalized, because a letter of rec is so valuable to your application as a whole. All right. Now, again, for part 2 next week, we're going to be covering, again, your application, selecting the schools, which is super important, talk about the recommenders, talk about financial aid, and a lot more. And I want to give you a little bit of hint about the different components of the application process. So a little bit of a sneak peek of what we're going to talk about next week. So we're going to talk a little bit about LSAC, right? The Law School Admissions Council, I believe it stands for, about registering and what you should be thinking about in terms of that. There's also something cool there that's if you fill out a certain part of the application, that some schools will seek you. Those are not going to be the top ranked schools, but some schools are going to come after you and say, hey, we're going to waive your application fee. Please apply to our school because we saw your LSAT score and it's super high and it's kind of, what we want you to apply to. You've got your transcripts that you're going to submit to LSAC. You've got the LSAT and the GRE. We're going to talk about the difference between the two. We're going to talk about selecting the schools using reach, target, and safety schools and our methodology that has helped us so many times get students to pick the right schools and get them into those schools. We're then going to talk about school-specific application components, right? School-focused applications, short answers, the short questions, and so forth. Those are becoming more common. Letters of recommendation, the core materials, which we're going to cover in part 3 of our webinar series, the personal statement, diversity statement, addendum, and resume. Actually, the addendum and resume we'll cover next week. And then we're going to talk a little bit about financial aid. But the personal statement, diversity statement we'll cover the following week. So this is a little bit of a sneak peek into what we're going to be covering next week and the coming weeks, but it also kind of gives you a sense of all the different components that you're going to have to think about for law school. So it is no small order. It's a lot of work and a lot of things to kind of keep in mind, which again is why a lot of people work with Right Track, because what we end up doing is managing all of this for you. The time, guidance, all the kind of management of this process to make sure that you're hitting all the marks and getting your application well in advance so that you're not getting into any kind of trouble. All right. Lastly, I want to kind of talk a little bit about this concept, and I'm going to talk about it really kind of once. But before I do, let me answer a question. I think we got a question in. I have an unconventional profile. I'm an art major. I want to make a change in my career. What do you recommend? And so I imagine when you say career, you want to consider law school. So law school definitely is it's a major pivot, right? And so if you want to apply to it, I'll give you a good example. I had a client once who was in fashion and wanted to make a pivot and go to law school. And so we really had to kind of dig deep to find why is this person moving from fashion to law. And what we found was that this person really had this sense of, I don't want to say guilt, but I guess it was, in seeing how these sweatshops operated, employment mechanisms in terms of how these people's rights, and also felt a sense of guilt about the environment, especially with fast fashion. So we really gauged her story to be about how to protect the environment, how to protect people as a lawyer, to ensure that fashion is accessible to all, and essentially is something that is something that's protected. It's accessible and protected by the people who push it forward. So if you do decide to make a pivot like in art, what is it about art and your love of art and what you've been doing that really plays a role in terms of why law? Now, you may come back to me and say, there's nothing about art and law that I'm interested in, but art is something I love, but I'm also interested in art in general. I had another client, now that I think about it, that was exactly like that. And so we used art and art therapy to discuss in her diversity statement, right, about to exhibit a sense of compassion. But the concept of law had nothing to do with art, and we focused on other areas of interest to her, which I believe was something to do with, I think, transactional law or something like that. But because we exhibited compassion and diversity of thought in her diversity statement about art, it still worked in her favor, and she was able to get into a top school. So if you do have an unconventional profile, celebrate that, because people are sick and tired. Law schools are sick and tired of having the same background over and over again. And I think there's a better way of really kind of exhibiting differentiation in different profiles. Okay. So answering that question, hopefully that answers it and gives you a little sense of it. Now, before I sign off, and again, I want you to ask me anything you have, any questions, I want to quickly talk about future proofing. Okay, I think this is very interesting for you. So in terms of future proofing, it is so important that you are thinking about law, including me right now, about how you can not just say, oh, I'm scared of AI, but you want to harness the power of AI, harness the power of technology, and keep yourself relevant as a lawyer. So I use ChatGPT and different legal AI tools constantly as a transactional lawyer, right? And I think it's benefited me tremendously, but I'm able to do that because I learned the core foundational elements of being a lawyer, and then can use these other elements to fast track and make sure that I'm being the best advocate for my clients. So first thing before law school that I want you to think about, especially in this idea of how to future-proof yourself. And again, we're going to offer for you guys viewing this, if you watch all 4 webinars, you can have the opportunity to get this course for free. And in the course, I just added a chapter this summer about future-proofing and how you can really help yourself in terms of future-proofing your career as a lawyer. So I talk about this much more in depth, but these are the kind of things I want you to think about before, during, and after law school. So before law school, I want you to gain as much experience in law, especially the technological component. And you don't have to gain it at a law firm. You just need to learn it so that when you go to law school, you know how to seize that as a tool for you to succeed. So I want you to gain experiential learning in this field and to be more creative thinkers, so that you can think out of the box, and more practical in the approach when you approach law. Okay, so creativity, because it allows you to look at things multidimensionally, kind of like design thinking. If you guys don't know about design thinking, look it up, because it's really a fascinating way of problem solving, even for lawyers. That leads me to interdisciplinary studies. So important, because for me, as I said, I took a year out of law school and did a master's in international relations. Years later, I did a master's in public administration. I did courses on Google in project management and project finance. So there were so many ways I added to my own repertoire, right? And that came from interdisciplinary, looking at things from different perspectives. So when you asked, Anna, having an unconventional background in art, amazing, because I want to see people applying to law school with a diverse way of thinking, that you're not just your typical philosophy, history, government major, but that you've done a minor in musicology or, African American studies or Chicano studies or whatever it is that can showcase different aspects of who you are. And then also before and during law school, building those community memberships. Like I had so many mentors, and without them, there's no way in hell I would have gone into law school. So you want to basically build those mentors and professionals, because in terms of future-proofing, these are the guys who are going to get you your job. When I worked at a corporate law, I worked at Pillsbury. It was because of a hookup at Pillsbury that I knew that basically put my foot in the door. When I worked in government, again, in the Department of Commerce, it was someone who knew me and got me an introduction. When I worked now doing transactional law, again, all my connections at Berkeley Law provide me with plenty of clients. Again, now that I'm advising this medtech company, same thing. Everything has been through connections and mechanisms of thinking and developing and making myself impervious, so I'm not codependent on job sites, but that I have a whole hell of a network that I can tap into on LinkedIn and so forth, okay? And then just quickly, we talked about continuous learning. Like I told you, I literally took courses on Google. I just recently took a course on, project management, a whole half-year course on project management. I've done courses on all kinds of other stuff. That's also super important that I've added to my resume that's gotten me other jobs, right? Staying informed of market trends and job. Get those alerts. I get those alerts from those job sites, from like sites like the American Jurists, I think is something like that, where they provide you with updates, especially on market trends, job demand, and technology. And that really helps put, my brain's always thinking on rapid fire of what I need to be doing to put myself in the best situation possible as a lawyer, right? And then please, reskilling, upskilling. Reskilling, if you are like in a field that's super transactional and repetitive, and you want to reskill and retool yourself, and you make a monster pivot and you go into bankruptcy law, right? Reskill, be ready to reskill, right? And America affords you that opportunity. Or upskill, like I said, adding to your repertoire with different things that you could be doing so that you have more to offer. When I joined that medtech company, they didn't hire me because I was a lawyer. They hired me because I had an operational background, right? And I could see things from a multitude of perspectives, okay? So something I really, really want you to think about, and underscoring all of this, team, all of this is EQ. The more EQ you can exhibit through collaboration, strong work ethic, compassion, all these things is going to allow you to be a lot more impervious to the ways of legal AI. Okay. And again, in my book, I write a whole chapter about this, but I really want to show this to you guys because I think it's so, so important that I want you guys to think about it. So you guys don't come back to me and say, Hamada, what the hell was that? I just went through 3 years of law school, took the bar, passed the bar, and now I can't even freaking find a job because I have no idea how to handle the legal AI, and it's pretty much prevented me from being able to work in the legal field in a way that I could be paid commensurate with how much I paid for my law school education. All right. Before I tell you quickly who we are, we've got some more questions. My friend Diego right here saying, I'm a lawyer with an LLM. I'm applying to a JD, PhD dual program. Do you recommend having a better LSAT or aiming to build a very strong personal statement? Which is a great question and something that's very, very important to think about. First of all, you're kind of a very unique individual because you already have an LLM, you're already an attorney, and now you're thinking about taking a step backwards and doing a 3-year JD, which is wild. And it's interesting, unless you're telling me that you're thinking about doing an SJD, which is I think what you may want to consider rather than a JD PhD, because doing an SJD is a PhD in law. But if you're thinking about doing a JD so that you can be qualified in the US, even though you could be qualified in the US because you have an LLM, I think in your case, you have such an interesting background that you naturally are going to have very strong application materials. That's a given. But what's not a given is this. If you're applying to a JD, you better rock the LSAT, because I'm going to suspect, no, I may be wrong, that you did your legal studies in Spanish. And if you did, you've got to prove to them that you can ace a program in English in America. So the LSAT they're going to double down and definitely look at your LSAT. Now, if you apply to a PhD program, they probably won't look at your LSAT. If you're applying for another LLM, they're not going to care about your LSAT. But if you're applying to a JD, you're going toe-to-toe with every American. And there's probably 5%, I'm throwing this number out there, of people who are JD students who are international. It's so few because the priority is given to American students or students that don't have a law degree in general. So I would say definitely triple down on your LSAT, because your application materials, I think, are going to be strong regardless. I have another guy who's saying, what are your thoughts on using ChatGPT for my essays? And I'm going to say it, read my lips, Daniel, hell no. And I'm going to tell you why. 2 reasons. One, no, I'm not going to tell you 2 reasons this way. First, I'm going to tell you, ideate and outline with ChatGPT. I do it all the time. Ideate, outline. But do not use it to draft and edit. Why? Number one, I couldn't care less what you tell me. I can read a ChatGPT essay from a mile away. There's no way in hell I can't figure it out. And if you tell me, well, I use ChatGPT, tell me where the brain power went into it. Tell me where the authenticity went into it. Tell me why in the hell would a law school give you any credit for literally typing in a prompt that says, here's my life story, or here's my resume, create a personal statement that's authentic and emotional. Why would I give you any credit versus the person that's been suffering like I had to for 4 months to come up with a story that got me into Berkeley Law? And you know how many law schools I got into, Daniel? 1. Because Berkeley believed in me and took a chance on me. They won't if you use ChatGPT, because everybody can use it. It's so low-hanging fruit, and it's so frictionless that they're going to be like, this person's not even caring. They just popped it in, printed it, popped it into a Word document, spell checked it, which is already going to be spell checked, and submitted it. It just shows laziness. But use it to ideate and use it to outline for sure. And let me add one more thing to that, Daniel, which is super important for you to think about, is they have something called GPT-0, where they can run your essay through GPT-0 software, and they can see that you used whatever AI tool, whether it's Gemini or I'm forgetting the one that's used by Amazon, or obviously ChatGPT by Microsoft. In the end of the day, they can tell immediately that it was ChatGPT, and they will ding you for it. Okay, so do not use it for that. And let's see, any other questions? If I don't have any other questions, guys, thank you. Oh, before I say thank you, let me quickly tell you guys about us. See, I don't even care about selling you guys on who we are, because at the end of the day, I hope you guys just benefit from these webinars, because that's why I do them. And if you guys want the assistance, we're here to help. As I said, we've been around since 2008. We have a 96% success rate into a top law school program because we're so involved. Dude, guys, I've been through this so many freaking times. It was such a painful experience for me that I want to help as many people as possible, which is why I wrote the book, The College Admissions Mastery Guide. I wrote the book so that you guys will be able to benefit from that as well. And then if you want more personalized experience, we're here to help, right? And I think the other statistic here is that we probably take about 50% less time than if you did it on your own. Reduce the stress, right? Increase how fast you get it done to submit in time. We push you to be as brave and creative as possible in your application materials. And therefore, these 3 will allow you to succeed in getting into a top school and with funding. I can't tell you how much money we've helped clients get for to get into these top programs. And this is my team. I'll quickly go through these. Top left, this is some of my team, not all of them, but these are some of the marquee players. She got into Stanford Law with a Knight Hennessy Scholarship, which is a full ride. The guy in the middle got into Harvard Law's Junior Deferral Program, and so he's doing his master's in Oxford right now. The gentleman at the bottom got into NYU and is working as a corporate lawyer in New York. All right? So again, accomplished, diverse, and so forth. We've talked about the mastery course. We're going to give you guys these mastery checklists as well that kind of tracks everything that we've been talking about. Guys, this is a 4-part webinar. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's tons and tons more that I want to talk about. I hope that you guys are able to attend the rest of this with me. It's a hell of a journey, but I really hope that you guys can be with me for all 4 parts, because there's a lot we want to cover, talking about the essays, talking about the recommendations, talking about each part of the application process, and really getting you guys to submit on time, figure out the right law school for you in terms of your final decision, and then how to ace law school. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you guys next week on webinar 2.